707 on CJAD. Welcome to today's Entrepreneur, presented by Fuller Landau, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. Dan Delmar, along with Fuller Landau's Josh Miller. How's it going, Josh?
Good evening, Dan. Great tonight, thanks.
And our guest this evening of ColbaNet, Joseph Basili, is back on the program. Welcome back, Joseph.
Thank you very much.
Now, Joseph, there's lots of news when it comes to ColbaNet lately. You've launched a new venture.
Yes, we are launching this year IPTV, which means that we will be offering TV over the copper wire. We will be the first one to offer over copper wire because we are co-located in Bell Central offices, and we can offer in many areas of Montreal good internet speeds to offer IPTV. Our services are also unlimited.
Now, Dan, tonight's story is a really interesting one because it not just talks about the entrepreneur and his story, but ColbaNet is now gone public in the last number of months. Mm-hmm. So we get to hear how this Quebec SME, this entrepreneur, ends up taking his business, growing it, making a fantastic product and service, and taking it to the public market in the public market sector. So, Joseph, where did you start with ColbaNet?
I started in 1996. As you know, Jean, I am a chemist and I have two children, and I told my children I would like you to either be a lawyer or an MD. My daughter listened to me. She got her master's in pharmacology, but my son said, "Dad, I want to be a computer programmer." And I told him, okay, if you want to be a computer programmer, you won't run away. We will work together. And we opened ColbaNet in 1996.
Now, you didn't always do, obviously the IP or the television is new today, but what did it start out back then?
We started with dial-up, 56K, very slow technology, but those were the fun days because we had to turn off in our central office, in our data center, I should say, we had to turn off the modems and turn them back on because when they were too hot, they wouldn't give the connection to the internet consumers.
There's a little bit of technology chain that's gone along the way. How do you keep up as far as equipment?
Well, of course, actually the equipment outlasts the technology. So the modems and the equipment we bought to offer dial-up at the time are still being used today. So they are 10 years old, 15 years old. They still work. But dial-up today is like a dinosaur. Almost nobody uses except for the older people who just want to read their emails, typically, or people who are far away from Montreal, let's say in Saint-Adèle areas, far from Montreal. They only have dial-up because the copper wire from the central office, the Bell Central office, to their home is so long that they cannot offer ADSL.
Now, you said you were a chemist by trade. So the technology aspect, I presume you end up surrounding yourself with some of the people so that they can stay on top of the changing technology and help you and assist you in finding out and maneuvering what exactly is required to hit this market.
Yes, it's very important. Being a chemist, I am not very technical. So my son-in-law is a PhD in computer engineering, and he works part-time in the company. My son is a computer programmer. So, in fact, my son was the systems administrator when we started with dial-up until we started with ADSL. And a funny story that happened is that when he was doing his computer programming degree, he had to take care of also of the system. And one night we had an outage, and at 3 o'clock in the morning we were driving down on Park Avenue at 3 o'clock in the morning to turn the modems back on, and two beautiful girls coasted us and driving next to us, and they were asking my son, "Hello, do you want to have fun tonight?" And his reply was, "No, I have to work." And I said, "My God, what did I do to my son?"
Oh, I'm sure he doesn't regret a single moment. Now, does that mean you have family in the business?
Yes, in fact, we have 4 generations. My father is 93 and he works 3 days a week. I work also in the business. My son, my daughter, my son-in-law, and I have a grandson whom I take on my lap. We started coming to the office when he was 2 months old, so we trained them very early on. And to tease my daughter, I tell my son-in-law, my grandson, "I know where you're gonna work when you grow up." And my daughter would say, "No, Dad, you let him do what he wants."
Now, in many family businesses, sometimes the roles are not so obvious of the different family members. And Joseph, as you're telling me that there's number of people that are working, how do you assign roles, or do they naturally fill them along the way?
You mean the family?
The family roles, yes.
Family roles they choose. I think the way to keep the family together is to let the children win, let them choose. My two children have an MBA. They're knowledgeable. They learned what is done outside, and of course they have a very good value that they bring into the company. And I listen to them, and as they grow, they start using me as a sounding board. But at the end of the day, I say do whatever you want.
So you don't experience, there's never disagreements between family members?
Of course, there is agreement, but with love, with a lot of love in the recipe.
How do you work out the slight disagreements as you're conducting business?
So we sit down, we talk, we argue, and at the end, you have to say, "Look, son, look, daughter, you do it your way." And of course, they say, "Okay, I'll do it my way," but they remember what Dad said. So it's a mix of what Dad said one time, of what they think another time. Because if they're adamant that they studied it in university, it makes a good balance.
And does your father still play a role in the business, and I guess imparting his knowledge and wisdom?
Yes, of course. For me, my dad is my sounding board, because we built the companies. We started 46 years ago together. I have been with my dad so long that we shared the same experiences, but it's the way you see the perception of the problem, the perception, the way you bring a solution, and he is my sounding board. And I hope I will be the sounding board for my children also.
It sounds like it's a great relationship to have, and I think you should be very thankful. Not all entrepreneurs have such a great, open, and honest relationship with their family. Sometimes it comes to occasional battle or not, but it sounds like Joseph Basili and his family have worked things out very well. And I think one of the dynamics that I'd like to explore a little further is, what about the different generations? And how do the different generations and ideas and thought process really work inside a business? And I'm looking forward to discussing that with Joseph in a moment.
Today's Entrepreneur continues on CJAD. It's 7:15 right now.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
7:18 on CJAD. Today's Entrepreneur, inspiring stories from outstanding business people. Dan Delmar, along with Fuller Landau's Josh Miller, and our guest this evening, Joseph Basili of ColbaNet. And we're talking about, Joseph, how ColbaNet is really a family business, and you have 3 going on 4 generations now. How do you find the dynamic differing between various people, between you, your father, your son? What does everyone bring to the table, and what are some of the differences that you have to work out?
Sure. The major difference, if we take my dad, since we started business together, he started a wax hair remover business, and we're number 1 in Canada, but he's still in that business. So I told him that, and I did my graduate studies in chemistry to work with him. Then I wanted to diversify, and I told him, "Dad, we should diversify." And his answer was, "No, son, I will finance you, but I'm staying focused on my business." Now, so he focused on his only business. I diversified. My children multitask. They do 3-4 things at the same time. And this is the major difference. So by the fact that they control technology so well, they can do many things at the same time. As you know, now young people have those intelligent phones in their hands. They Twitter, they Facebook, they Google. It's absolutely fantastic.
Some of the baby boomer generation don't necessarily understand this multitasking ability of the current generation. Do you find, Joseph, that it takes away some of the focus, or can they really multitask properly?
Of course, it depends on the people, but if I talk about my children, they are very focused at the office. So, for example, they will spend 90% of their time, I think, on the business, 10% multitasking. So they spread the workload intelligently.
I think after hearing a lot of entrepreneurs talk on the show, Dan, and we've heard a lot of different generational topics and people bringing in family, and while they always talk so nicely about their offspring, there are certainly definitely challenges along the way when it comes to these different types of work ethic, if you will. multitasking, trying to stay focused. But I think it does come down to work ethic. And if the current generation has the work ethic, then, and that's what they learned from their parents and grandparents, that's certainly where the entrepreneurs, the baby boomers, the ones passing off the business are certainly going to benefit. And that's something that, I guess everybody has to learn a little bit, the young from the old and the old from the young.
Well, what I may add about that multitasking, it's not only having fun. For example, when you need some legal advice, you take the phone, you pay your lawyer $300, $400, $500, $600 an hour. But the young generation, when they do their MBA, some of their friends are lawyers in big law firms or are bankers or they work in accounting firms. So what they do, they send a message, they SMS, they ask the question, and they get the legal advice for free.
So you're saying they use their networks more than the older generations?
By far, because they know how to do it instantly. In the old days, you used to call, leave a message, or even now you email, but people don't read their emails as much as they read their SMSs. So yeah, I think they're much more productive with all the social networks that we have today.
Today's Entrepreneur on CJAD continues. Our guest, Joseph Basili of ColbaNet.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Welcome back to today's Entrepreneur. Our guest this evening, Joseph Basili of ColbaNet. And we were speaking earlier of Joseph, of your new IPTV service and how you'll be taking on some major players in the market like Videotron and Bell Express View. Are you going into this... is it intimidating to take on these huge players in the TV market?
No, I don't get intimidated easily. We are the Walmart of internet. So what we do is that we offer more at a lower cost. And people, of course, some people will stay, of course, with the big names, but we get a lot of customers because of our aggressive pricing for the same quality.
You've been in this business now for quite a number of years. Was there a slow build-up to get to this competitive level, and how do you keep tabs of all of them?
Well, of course, we started with dial-up, and we were all on a level playing field. There was no barrier at entry. Then Videotron started offering the cable service, Bell the DSL service, and then it became a duopoly. Those were the hardest days because we didn't have the chance to offer the same service. The CRTC then obliged Bell and Videotron to let us piggyback on their networks and to resell their services white label under our name. And so we started rebuilding our customers. Now, of course, you have to stay on top. You have to read. You have to consult in order to know what is coming. Recently, because of the hard way we have to compete with the ISPs, not the big incumbents, but the independent ISPs, made an association called CNOT, the Canadian Network Operators Consortium, and in that association there are big names like Primus, Distributel, TechSavvy, etc. So I'm on the board of that association, and I'm also chairman of the negotiations committee. So I negotiate with the big telephone companies, etc.
And you've been on this board or involved in this group for a long time now?
Since it was founded, and that was about 5-6 months ago. So it's a young association, very dynamic, very knowledgeable. It's all company presidents that are in that association, and that of course helps me be on top of everything that is happening in the telecom field, in the ISP field.
Now, before this consortium came about 6 months ago, I mean, you've been in business for many years before that. How did you stay on top of them, on your competition? How do you stay involved? What other areas did you have to keep your eyes wide open for?
Well, on the regulatory side, of course, you have to go on the CRTC website to see what's happening. You read the technical articles, etc. And of course, you once you know your field and you're an expert, you have to compete in advertising, in service, customer service, like a regular business.
So you really have to stay on top. You have to know your industry, know your sector very well, and I guess know all the trade magazines and the people to talk to and stay on top of, I presume, as in any business. Is there a particular marketing strategy that you use that really props you up and compares you against them well?
Yes, of course. What we do now is, of course, it's as I said, we were the Walmart of internet, so it's the lowest price. So, but we advertise in specific newspapers and mainly in electronically, so on Google, on Facebook, on websites like that.
Very interesting to hear is certainly the growth pattern, and I'm really looking forward to this entrepreneur took his company public, and that's some exciting stuff that I'm looking forward to hearing about.
Today's Entrepreneur continues in a moment on CJAD. Our guest is Joseph Basili of ColbaNet, and we'll return in a moment. Also, we'll take more of an IT angle in the second half hour with Kevin Ammerman, IT Director at Fuller Landau, and he'll be here to answer some IT questions for you as well. If you have any regarding your small or medium-sized business, 514-790-0991 and Star Talk, star 8255 on Bell Mobility. It's 7:30 right now on CJAD.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
7:34 on CJD. Welcome back to today's Entrepreneur, presented by Fuller Landau, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. Dan Delmar, along with Fuller Landau's Josh Miller, and our guest this evening, Joseph Basili of ColbaNet. And Joseph, you recently took the company public, which is a decision I'm sure you didn't take lightly.
Of course not, but that had been my dream for the past 25 years. So I took the smaller company of the companies I have public to since I'm 63 years old today in order to realize a dream, and I have absolutely no regrets. It's a small company. The market cap is small, but I would like to build it with time, enhance shareholder value, and hopefully make it a big company.
Now, it must have been a whole process, and certainly not every small business goes public. Can you walk us through a little bit of the process and how you went about taking this company public, Joseph?
Yes, of course. The hardest part was to find a sponsor, because you have to find a broker who says, okay, I will take you under my wing and I will raise money for you. So there are two ways. If your company is fairly big, or if you have a hell of a business model and a business plan, you do an IPO, an initial public offering. But the other way is to form a CPC, a capital pool company, which is a shell, and all you do is that you have to find a minimum of 200 shareholders, and they must invest a minimum of $1,000 each. So you raise, let's say, a minimum of $200,000. This is what we did so that we don't get diluted too much. And the goal of that CPC is to find a target company, and our goal was that the target company would be ColbaNet and merge the two together. So we started in 1995. We had 2 years to do the merger, but then, as you remember, in 2007, 2008, we had that big crash on March 9, 2008. So we decided to wait, otherwise the value of the shares will only go down. Last year, you have also two stock markets in Canada. You have the TSX, and you have a new one that is Ontario-based called the CNSX, the Canadian National Stock Exchange, and our ticker symbol is CB on the Canadian on the CNSX. The advantage of the CNSX is that it caters to smaller companies. The workload, the regulatory workload for business owners, for CEOs, is not as heavy on the TSX.
Is it, there must be a little bit more to the process. I mean, you have to file certain items or certain documents as you go along. Do you need the assistance of a lawyer, or, how does the process work of actually taking it to that level of, hey, this company is going to have its offering to shares to the public or to the greater public?
Once you find the sponsor, the broker, then he says you have to write a prospectus, and this is the heaviest part. It's a 100-page document. You have to hire lawyers, you have to hire accountants, you have to do audited financial statements. For the past 3 years, often private companies don't do audited because we never borrowed from the bank, so we didn't need it, but we did it to go public. And from that $200,000 you raise, more than half of it goes for auditors and lawyers. Once you have the prospectus, you get your listing, and then every 3 months you have to publish your results, the financial statements. So that's unaudited, and at the end of the year, audited financials. And once a year you have the shareholders meeting, the annual shareholder meeting.
Now, you never, as I understand your entrepreneurial life, you never really had partners in your various businesses. Is that correct?
I had in one business, but they were older than me and I bought them out.
So then you were pretty much running your own businesses or being sole shareholder for many years.
For many, many years.
Now that you have this public company that you're leading, you have a responsibility to the shareholders. So they're not partners, but you certainly have a duty to them. How have you looked at that or viewed that as a major change in how you operate?
Yes, I do consider them as partners because what's good for them will be good for me also. The fact that you're public, you have to be much more structured. All your books have to be up to date. You have to consult your lawyer, your accountant. So everything is done properly. Everything, your mind becomes more organized, more structured, and the whole company follows. So you also teach your employees. You have to be on time. You have to offer good service. As you can see, the whole process is improved and I have absolutely no regrets.
No, so this is, you would say, from operating a company standpoint, it's actually a big benefit.
Yes, it is definitely. It structures you and that's very, very important in a business.
Do you not feel more pressure day to day?
Yes, yes, somehow, in the sense that you have deadlines. For example, on the CNSX, within the first 5 days, you have to publish what is new in the business. It doesn't take much time, but if you forget the 5 days, there is a penalty. Everything is with penalty, so you have the stick.
Now, we were talking a little bit earlier, going public and trying to expand the product line and make sure the service offering is correct. How have you been accomplishing this? Is this internal? Have you been making some acquisitions along the way?
Yes, in my business lifespan, I acquired 14 companies. 10 were in the pharmacy, on the pharmaceutical side, and 4 were on the internet side. The latest one was the CGI Internet Division, and with it came big names that I shall not name tonight.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, definitely we did make acquisitions. So we grew organically and by acquisition.
And of all those 14 acquisitions, have you learned a lesson or two? Is there something that you would do differently now, knowing what you know today?
Yes, definitely. The big mistake, there are 2 mistakes I did. One is that I never sold. When you buy a company, you build it, you should sell it, because otherwise the brand wears out, the brand dies out, or the laws change in the pharmaceutical world. If you have a DIN number, the formula can be refused at a point in time because the ingredient is forbidden or becomes, behind the counter, allowed only by prescription, etc. So if from here on, being public, the goal is to raise money, to build the company to a big size, and maybe to sell one day, so that all the shareholders in 5, 10, 15 years make a lot of money. Of course, some will come in early and get out early, but the longer they will stay, I hope the more money they will make.
Are there any acquisitions you made along the way that you regret, or perhaps you maybe shouldn't have gone into?
I don't regret any acquisition, but what I regret is that I didn't think bigger. I thought like a businessman who controls his business 100%, never goes bankrupt, but you have to leverage. For the same amount of work, you should buy a bigger company. If you acquire a bigger company, the staff they have are better formed, are smarter, they have a bigger market share. So for the same workload, you grow much bigger, you make much more profit. It's just a matter of daring to do it. And today, of course, I'm not afraid at all because of the 14 acquisitions I did.
No, and certainly as you take on, or as you kind of cohabitate with the Bells of the world and the Videotrons of the world, you certainly have to have that mentality of you can take it on, whether it's David versus Goliath or what have you. You can certainly defeat and conquer anything. I guess I'm curious to know, like, in your hot market and certainly today's technological advancements, what's next? Like, what's hot today? What are you really concentrating on in your business, and how are you tackling it?
Well, we see our business as offering a pipe to the consumer. That's the broadband over the copper wire. The next generation will be, of course, fiber to the home that will offer speeds that are 10, 100, 1,000 times faster. So for the next 5 years, we see that speeds of 20 megabits will be required to receive good quality HD. To start with 3D also, it will be good enough. But after that, we'll have to go to 40 megabits for the next 5 years. So next 5 years is 20, then it will be 40. And of course, the technology will go much faster because fibers can offer speed up to a gig. It will be unlimited.
And the consumer market that's changing, I guess you also have to stay on top of that as well, with people that are spending their dollars, some a little more conservatively and others just really want the best product out there.
Of course, if you live in Westmount, you you can pay the price you want. But if you live in a multi-dwelling unit, you have to split your budget in a certain way. So for internet, you will not pay $150 easily, but it will be much easier to pay for a triple play, let's say $50 or $60 to get good quality internet, good high speed. That we call the triple play telephony with unlimited long distance. Canada, USA, and IPTV.
There's so much change out there. There's so much technology, Dan. The entrepreneurs today have so many challenges to face. What should they invest in? What should they spend their time and using the technology today? It's an absolute minefield. There's so much out there. You can get absolutely bombarded with information. And I think there's a lot of challenges that come up. And when Kevin comes on, I think we're going to talk about some of the challenges, some of the software that entrepreneurs can use to their benefit and simplify their lives.
Kevin Ammerman, IT Director at Fuller Landau, joins the conversation next on Today's Entrepreneur. It's 7:45 right now.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
7:47 on CJD, Today's Entrepreneur. Inspiring stories from outstanding business people, Dan Delmar, along with Fuller Landau's Josh Miller. Our guest this evening, Joseph Basili of ColbaNet. And we bring into the conversation the IT Director at Fuller Landau, Kevin Ammerman. Welcome back, Kevin.
Hello, thank you.
So let's start by talking about small and medium-sized businesses who may be hesitant to adopt computerized systems or to really get on the bandwagon when it comes to IT technology. What advice would you have for entrepreneurs who fear, first of all, making that investment and also, I guess, transferring all of their old paperwork onto something more electronic?
There are a few companies out there today, even today, that are pretty much run on pencil and paper. The vast majority of them are computerized to at least some degree, but it's surprising how many are still relying on systems that were installed probably in the 80s or something like this, and they've never been upgraded. And a lot of that is just simply through fear of changing things and fear of springing new things on their employees. So they've had employees that they have been with the company for many, many years. They're very efficient at the tasks that they're performing, and they're very hesitant to change this line of business kind of application that they're using. But the new fear that's emerging is, how are you going to support these old systems? Because literally the people that know these systems inside and out, they just don't exist anymore. They've moved on to other careers. In some cases, they've died, and it's almost impossible to find support for a system that was installed in the 80s.
So you're saying that you really got to get out of the dinosaur age, some people, and embrace today's technology, but don't be afraid of it because it can really help you. I mean, what are the areas? I mean, entrepreneurs shouldn't be afraid. What's their one highest thing they shouldn't be afraid of and should really use to their advantage?
Well, the big thing is to look at the scale of their business and to make sure that the software and the tools, just the general tools that they're using, suit the scale of their business and their growth plans. So if you're planning on launching a business, and maybe you've only got 5 people in the office now, but you're planning on expanding, you're quadrupling your business in the next 16 months, don't get stuck with a system and don't spend time entering information into a system and wasting time when you should be looking at growth and planning on something bigger.
And Joseph was saying earlier that, I mean, you still have clients, Joseph, who are still on dial-up, right? So not everyone's caught up.
Absolutely. Of course, the churn is high. We're on dial-up, but we definitely have maybe 10% of the customers we had 10 years ago who are still on dial-up.
Wow.
Some of the entrepreneurs that are still clinging to their paper and pencil are worried about information and the information that's out there, whether it's in cyberspace, whether they could lose it. How can you allay their fears, Kevin? Like, what should they really pay attention to?
Well, it's definitely, it's correct to be a little bit worried about the information that we're putting out there. A lot of people, and especially when we're talking about social networking things and those kind of new systems, they're putting out a lot more information than they really need to. So take a look at what's really important to the line of business that you're in, the kind of information that you need to share, and find efficient ways to share that. So don't go overboard. You don't have to put your entire business online if you're a bricks and mortar kind of business, but look at ways that you can more effectively share the information that will help your business grow. And make sure you have good controls over that. Use well-known tools and get well-informed people to help you out.
How can they protect their information?
Well, again, you got to your average business person, especially someone who's moving from pencil and paper into the computer world, they're not going to be able to do this on their own. They're going to need help to make sure that they have the right systems in place and that they have the right security measures in place. This doesn't have to cost a fortune, okay? So you don't have to bring in security experts or things like this, but deal with a reputable supplier, deal with companies that are known and trusted and well recommended to you, and ask questions. When you're setting these systems up, say, hey, what happens if someone tries to attack us? Is it possible for us to be attacked? What kind of have you lost any information in the past? That's nobody ever asks these questions of their provider, but in a lot of cases they have lost information in the past, and you want to know how they deal with that, how they notify their clients.
How do you convince a smaller or medium-sized business owner who is still on the old system to make the investment? Because a lot of people will say, well, it's not really going to save me all that much time, or it's going to cost way too much. How do you get over that financial hurdle?
Well, it's really sad, but a lot of times it comes down to fear, and that's not a good growth strategy. It's much more encouraging to deal with businesses who do have a growth plan in mind and are seeing these as tools to expand, rather than the kind of companies that are propelled by fear to make changes just because they're worried about being able to get support for their systems. They're worried about being able to communicate with their vendors. Fear is not a good motivator, but in all too many cases, that's what's driving these people. So they wait until too late, and then they're propelled by external forces to make these changes rather than planning ahead and getting ahead of the game.
I think fear ends up being a good selling tool, but for the wrong reason. It may be the right result at the end of the day, but for the wrong reason. And I think I'm looking forward to Kevin commenting on afterwards on backups and storing and making sure that your backups are working properly and get restored properly.
Today's Entrepreneur on CJAD at 7:53.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
7:54 on CJAD. Welcome back to Today's Entrepreneur. Our guest this evening, Joseph Basili of ColbaNet, and the IT director at Fuller Landau, Kevin Ammerman. And shall we move on to I guess, for those who do have systems in their small and medium-sized businesses, how to protect them?
And we were talking about backups just before, and I think there's too often entrepreneurs, they have a system in place. They say, oh yeah, it's backed up. My controller has it. The secretary backed it up. It's great. It's not working. And then disaster happens, and you try and restore the backup, and little do you know, there's nothing on the backup tape. Kevin, what are some things that owners, entrepreneurs have to be aware of?
Well, you're right. Millions and millions of dollars are spent on backup tapes and backup drives and disk arrays and things like this. And I would say in the majority of times, the stuff that people expect to be backed up isn't. They never check. They set things up. The first day that they buy this fancy equipment, they set it up, they make sure everything's running nice, and then they never look at it again. And that doesn't work. You've got to keep an eye on these things and make sure that as people add new information and new systems, that the backups are still up and running and accurate. And it's really important, and it's really simple to do. You just, you try to restore some files before they actually go missing, and make sure that you can find the information that you really need to continue your business. And there are so many inexpensive options, even free options online these days. Again, they're well secured, they're encrypted. They give you good visibility and warnings if there's a problem with your backup via email, and it provides another layer of security. It takes the fear out of the equation so that you can worry on the more fun things in your business.
And as people go more towards this cloud computing, does that make it easier or harder protect or safeguard your information.
It makes it very different. So even though maybe your email is all hosted online with Google or Microsoft or one of these big companies, but what happens if they have problems? You got to still back that information up, and there are utilities out there that help with this kind of backup. But you got to keep that in mind. Maybe it'll be something as simple as you'll lose access to that account, and suddenly you can't get that email for a few days. That few days can be a long time in the business world.
Are there so many softwares to sift through, or is it really tailored? You have to look at your business and say, this is the right software for me.
There are, in terms of backup software, there's a huge variety of not only softwares but different mechanisms that you can use. And it really, even for a very small business, you got to have more than one backup. You got to have a couple of layers in there. So making a plan, looking at the different ways that you can approach this without spending a fortune and still get an effective backup and make sure you have a little bit of peace of mind.
Thank you very much, Kevin. So while fear drives it, you really got to make sure that your security is safe.
Definitely.
Joseph, I'd really love to ask you this one question. We listened to a great story and your 40 some odd years of being an entrepreneur and in business and taking a company public. Tell us, what one piece or two pieces of wisdom would you give to today's entrepreneur?
Okay, of course, there is no magic formula, but the entrepreneur must go in a field that he is very good at. For example, if you're a technical person, don't go opening a restaurant, because if there is a problem, once you're in your area of expertise, you know how to solve the problem. Number two, it's a tough world out there. You have to work very hard. Don't be afraid to bring in a shareholder who has money or who can bring in advice. And of course, if you work very hard, you go into the niche market, there are good chances you will be successful.
Thank you. Dan, there's so many takeaways of today's show, but I'm going to cling to something that was said earlier on. And while it was a small comment, it really resonated with me. And that's understanding and dealing with a family dynamic. Being open to other people's ideas and approaches. Joseph earlier said, you know what, the next generation multitasks, and they may not be focused. In his case, they are. But you know what? It was a good thing, because maybe they're getting advice. Maybe they're using their system to make the most out of it in today's business, in today's really fast-paced, moving entrepreneurial world. So the embracing that a parent does over a child in their business, I think, is huge, and not enough entrepreneurs in family business take the time and think about it. And that's one thing I'd really like to thank Joseph for bringing out. It was a small point earlier, but it was something that really resonated, and entrepreneurs and family businesses should really, really cling to.
And always good to surround yourself with people who you can get along with and people who could contribute, which I'm getting the feeling is the case at Colba.
It's it sounds like it's a great family atmosphere. It's a great business environment. And thanks very much, Joseph, for being part of this.
Joseph Basili of ColbaNet, thank you. And thanks to Kevin Ammerman, IT Director at Fuller Landau. And Josh Miller, we'll see you back here next Monday night at 7 p.m. You can reach Fuller Landau during business hours at 514-875-2865 or visit their website, www.flmontreal.com. Delmar at Night is next on CJAD.